Well, you're probably bored of listening to me talk, having been with you already 45 minutes, but we've got 15 minutes to end the day, and thank you for those of you who are here to hear this talk. What I was going to talk to you about is a little bit about the balance sheet of nature, which, as I've already mentioned, is not great. But so, and I'm going to tell you just a few stories from what in my life, what I've tried to do. So I started out life as a zoologist. I told you I was hugging orangutans and trees, and I found I couldn't save them that way, so now I hug asset managers and bankers. That is this transition from zoology and the canopy of the world's rainforests. And I then watched all the world's rainforests being destroyed in so many areas, and this made me pretty angry. And scientists were happy to keep documenting this, but didn't really want to actually do anything about it. That tends to be NGOs. So I started several NGOs, one in Oxford, which is called Global Canopy. And we started looking at who is driving the deforestation process. And then we started to look at who is financing the deforestation process. And that then led me to work in the climate negotiations to bring the forests and the emissions coming from forests into the climate negotiations under the UN. And then finally now, today, working with the financial sector and trying to help them to understand the risks that we're all running. And you know, one thing I've learned is that this is a really tough process over 15 years. At the beginning, everybody would just move to the other side of the room. They were just not interested at all. And if you said 50 years ago, look, we must save rainforests, no one really was very interested in that except NGOs, not my friends, not people in the street, and certainly not the financial sector. But that has changed a lot, and sort of inch by inch, you keep working on it, and you never give up. And I'm just going to show you this video, which in a sense is what it's all about. Let's see the video.
The world has an epic plan called the Global Goals. And it's halftime. I don't know what to say, really. Either we heal as a team, or we're gonna crumble. Inch by inch, play, we're finished. We're in hell right now. And we can stay here, or we can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell. 1 inch at a time. You know, when you get old in life, things get taken from you. I mean, that's part of life. But you only learn that when you start losing stuff. You find out life's this game of inches. 1/2 a step too late or too early, and you don't quite make it. 1/2 second too slow, too fast, you don't quite catch it. The inches we need are everywhere around us. Hell yeah. On this team, we fight for that inch. We claw with our fingernails for that inch. Because we know when we add up all those inches, that's gonna make the difference between winning and losing. Between living and dying. And I know if I'm gonna have any life anymore, it's because I'm still willing to fight and die for that inch. Because that's what living is. The 6 inches in front of your face. Now, I can't make you do it. You gotta look at the guy next to you. Now, I think you're gonna see a guy who will go that inch with you. Hell yeah. You're gonna see a guy who will sacrifice himself for this team because he knows when it comes down to it, you're gonna do the same for him. And either we heal now as a team, or we will die as individuals. Now, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do?
It's a tough question, isn't it? What are you gonna do? Well, there's one thing you have decided to do, which is to come here to the Planetiers conference. There may not be very many people in the room, but each one of you can take back a message to the people who are not in the room. And often I've been to conferences like this that begin small and they grow. When I started talking about these things, nobody wanted to hear. It's changed dramatically. This kind of issue is on the front page of newspapers everywhere. It's inside the financial sector, and they're all thinking about it. And at COP26 in Glasgow, in the United Kingdom, it was a major moment where the first time nature was on an equal footing with climate. Nature-based solutions for climate were being talked about everywhere. And you see it every day now in our newspapers. There is great concern about this. But I want to just, let's go back a bit. Let's have the slides now. And if we can put the first one on. I started out life working in Tsavo East National Park in Nairobi, in Kenya. Can you get the first slide up? I don't know if any of you have been to East Africa, but Tsavo East National Park is huge. There used to be about 16,000 black rhino living in that park. When I was going around then, it was a bad day if we didn't get charged at least twice. On one occasion, the rhino horn came right through the side of the Land Rover. We were looking out the other way. And luckily it went over the guy's leg and didn't go in it. How many are in that park today? Well, there's about, last time I counted, about 67. Only 5 or 6 live in the wild. 16,000 down to 5 or 6 living in the wild. And the answer is to do with money. It's to do with the value of their horn, which of course is used as an aphrodisiac or to cure headaches or whatever else, ground up into powder, mainly in China, but not only China, also other places, used as daggers in Yemen for a long time, dagger handles, ceremonial. And everything we've done to try and stop the demise of the black rhino hasn't worked because the market is too powerful. The market is too powerful. See that number, 69%. Well, that's a number you should take away with you. And if you're in the finance sector, I always say to them, I'm not going to talk numbers all day to you, because they love talking numbers in the financial sector. I just want you to remember this one, which is 69%, which is the extent of loss of wildlife populations on Earth since 1970. I left university in 1975. So just in my lifetime, nearly 70% of global wildlife populations have gone, lost, finished. That's a disaster for our economy because we depend on nature. The World Economic Forum has estimated that some 50% of global GDP is directly or moderately dependent on services from nature. Eco has always been in the word economy. It's just been invisible. Now, if you were running a business and you saw your business, what you depended on as a business going down by 70%, you would be terrified. You would change your business, but that is not what is happening, though there's been a big wake-up call. So what do you do? That thing that Al Pacino says, what are you going to do? When I looked at the rhino horn with all those data numbers on it, you realize that the only way we're going to fix this problem is by changing the movement of money. Because if we don't fundamentally change the movement of money, we will finance ourselves into extinction. That means your bank, your pension fund, if you have one, your insurance company, which takes your premium to insure your car and then invests that money in the wrong things. I've found that the financial sector, particularly large pension funds, are often investing completely blind. They don't have any data on natural capital. They only have data on financial capital. So I thought, we need to change that. With my research group in Oxford, I said, think of yourselves as acupuncturists. We're very small, only 60 people. And to change something in the world, you have to decide where to put that needle in. And the idea was to create a reporting and disclosure framework for the finance sector on nature. We already have one on climate. It's called the TCFD, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. And all large financial sector and corporate companies in the United Kingdom will have to report on their climate impacts by 2025 using that framework. It will fundamentally change the movement of money. It was started by Mark Carney, who was a Canadian and became Bank of England, and Michael Bloomberg, who runs the Bloomberg terminals, through which 3/4 of investment decisions are made in the Western world. All that data in the Bloomberg terminals and also Refinitiv terminals, which is another really big data provider to the finance industry, lacked information on natural capital. It's changing now. On a Bloomberg terminal, they have a ticker going telling you how much carbon is in the atmosphere every day, how much CO2 is there. And they're really waking up their people to this. So you need this extra screen with all the nature data and climate data alongside the financial data. You need to make it visible. And this is what TNFD set out to do. So coupled with the Paris Agreement, which allowed 200 countries to say, we're going to set a big target for reducing emissions, and then a guidebook, the TCFD. We tried to do the same thing here. We create the guidebook of the TNFD alongside the COP15, which happened in Montreal, which was the biodiversity COP, the one for nature. Now, I'm going to just show you a couple of things, but I'm going to run through. It's kind of technical, so I'm going to skip those because it's the end of the day. But just to show you, I just had this idea. I put it out to my friends around the world who are thinkers and said, do you think we could make one for nature, a cousin to the one on climate? And they said, yeah, it's a really good idea, but how'd you do it? And you get it going, and you get it going, and suddenly it started to build up. And in the end, we launched it in 2001, and we got all these financial institutions over there, the corporates in the middle, the big guys like Deloitte, EY, KPMG, all these people came in because they recognized that after climate, nature is next. We have to figure out this guidebook because we all have a big footprint on nature. We've got to make it smaller, but we don't know how to do it. This is going to be the guidebook. So we started creating the guidebook, but we didn't have a target like 1.5 degrees. We don't have a currency like a ton of CO2. So we had to invent all this. This is what happens when you don't recognize nature risk. This is the biggest electricity company in the world, practically, and Pacific Gas and Electric Company in California. And they got fires, started by the electric cables running through forests that were really dry in California a few years ago. A spark from the power lines caused the fire. They lost 18,000 homes, 85 deaths. That was physical risk. Transition risk, lawsuits. It was the biggest Chapter 11 courtroom case. $13.5 billion had to be paid out. The company went bust. The CEO lost all their money. The other systemic risk was that they were taking a levy off the electricity company to pay for renewable energy, and that went away. So this is how you translate nature risk into language that is understood by the corporates and finance sector. So we've got more than 1,000 forum members. Our framework has already been viewed 750,000 times. I couldn't believe how this thing has grown around the world just in the last few years. That tells you something. People really care about nature. They just need to find a pathway through the maze. And this is it. So it's all about dependencies, risks, impacts, opportunities, linking nature to business, with the finance sector looking on to find this guidebook. I'm not going to spend a long time on this. The first thing you have to do is locate where your assets are. A bank lends money to a mining company. It might have 50 locations around the world. You lend them $1 billion. Do you know where that money is being used? No. They never asked that question. Now they will have to, because if you have a mining company in a desert or a delta, it has a very different nature profile. So banks are collecting location data, they have to collect evaluation data, they have to evaluate what the risk is, assess how big it is, and then decide what they're going to report. This is all technical stuff. If you want to know more, you can go to the website, which is tnfd.global. Here are some of the companies now that are starting to use this framework and are going to start reporting on it. We're going to have a big show and tell in Davos at the World Economic Forum in January. And so just to end, I kind of thought, we need to create a community that's much more educated about natural capitalism, the way in which the world has run itself for 1 billion years. And so we're trying to create this community of people who care about this. And so we have a training course, which you can go and find on the Equilibrium Futures website. If you just put training.equilibriumfutures, you'll find it. But I kind of think, listening to Al Pacino in that movie, this is kind of a soft thing. It looks like the lion, which is our conscience, is chasing the person on the right. In fact, they should be running together. They are running together, because the lion is going to bite us in the bum if we don't get this right. And we need to also, I think, have a bit more of a roar about this. We shouldn't be apologetic about nature and financial capital and natural capital working together. There's been a lot of pushback in the United States about this thing called ESG, Environment, Social Governance, saying it doesn't really work, it's not important. And I think we should roar right back, because this is the most important change to happen in our world for 1.5 centuries. And this renaissance is going to happen about bringing nature back into a state of equilibrium between natural capital and financial capital is probably the most important thing we've ever done. Thank you.